You are sitting beside a fire in what will one day become the Utah desert. The night is freezing, the wind is pushing smoke into everyone's face, and nobody has invented a chimney yet. There are no cigarettes, no carved pipes, and no ancient version of a convenience store hiding behind the rocks. There is only a small hunting group, several stone tools, a pile of animal bones, and one very smoky fire. Then somebody brings an unfamiliar plant back to camp. Maybe they collected it for food, medicine, or a purpose that disappeared before anyone could write it down. A few leaves fall close to the hot coals. The plant begins to smolder, and a sharper smell spreads through the camp. Most people probably cough, close their eyes, and move away from the smoke. That is usually what the human body tells you to do when something is burning near your face. But imagine that one person stays close for a few seconds longer. The smoke enters the lungs, and something inside the body suddenly feels different. Maybe the pain becomes weaker, the mind feels lighter, or the world seems slightly less ordinary. That person has no word for nicotine, no knowledge of chemistry, and absolutely no idea what just happened. But the human brain is very good at remembering experiences that feel unusual, so perhaps the plant is placed near the fire again on another night. We cannot prove that scene happened exactly this way, because thoughts, sensations, and decisions do not become fossils. What survived instead were several tiny burned seeds buried inside the ancient hearth. Those seeds belonged to Nicotiana, the same plant family that later gave the world tobacco. They were found at a human campsite dating to roughly 12,300 years ago. That sounds like the oldest smoking evidence ever discovered, but archaeology is rarely that generous. A burned seed can prove tobacco reached the fire without proving that anyone deliberately chose to inhale its smoke. The trail now returns to a windswept site near Utah's Great Salt Lake Desert, where ancient people once gathered around a hearth. Among the ash, stone tools, and animal remains, archaeologists discovered several tiny seeds belonging to the genus Nicotiana. The hearth dated to roughly 12,300 years ago, making the discovery far older than any known cigarette, cigar, or tobacco plantation. At first glance, the conclusion seems obvious. People at this site must have been smoking tobacco thousands of years before agriculture. But archaeology rarely allows a conclusion that quickly, because a seed can reach a fire through several different human activities. The plants may have been collected for their leaves, while the seeds remained attached and later dropped into the flames. People could have chewed parts of the plant, used them medicinally, or carried them for purposes that left no recognizable trace. The seeds might also have entered the hearth when unused stems or leaves were discarded after another activity. What matters is that the seeds were found inside a human activity area rather than scattered randomly across untouched ground. Stone tools and butchered animal remains showed that people had eaten, worked, and rested around this fire. The Nicotiana seeds therefore became part of a wider pattern connecting the plant to deliberate human behavior. This was not merely a wild plant growing somewhere near an ancient campsite. Someone probably gathered the plant, transported it, or handled it close enough for its seeds to reach the hearth. That alone is a remarkable discovery, because it pushes human interaction with tobacco deep into the last ice age. Yet interaction is not the same as smoking, and the distinction prevents an exciting clue from becoming a false certainty. The seeds themselves contain less nicotine than the leaves, making them unlikely to have been the most valued part. Their presence may therefore indicate that other plant material once existed nearby, but disappeared before archaeologists arrived. If leaves were burned intentionally, the people around the hearth could have encountered the smoke directly, but the same fire could also have destroyed discarded plant waste without anyone trying to inhale the fumes. No pipe was recovered from the hearth, and no enclosed structure remained to trap the smoke around human bodies. There was also no written account describing what the plant meant to the people who carried it. The site can therefore tell us that tobacco mattered, but it cannot reveal exactly how that importance was expressed. This places the wishbone evidence firmly within our second category, deliberate human use of a specific plant. It does not yet reach the third category, where the archaeological context shows that smoke itself was intentionally produced. The discovery still changes the investigation because it proves that tobacco entered human life far earlier than historians once imagined. It also reveals why the oldest evidence can remain weaker than a younger discovery with a clearer purpose. A single seed may survive for 12 millennia, while the actions surrounding it disappear completely. To move closer to smoking, we need a device designed to hold heat and a residue identifying what burned inside it. That combination would show more than human contact with a plant. High in Central Asia, wooden braziers buried beside the dead would provide exactly that missing chemical clue. The investigation now moves eastward to the high plateau of Central Asia, where a cemetery known as Jirzankal holds a different kind of evidence. Archaeologists working among the stone tombs uncovered small wooden braziers placed beside the remains of people buried about 2,500 years ago. Several braziers contained stones that had been heated until their surfaces changed under repeated exposure to intense temperatures. These were not ordinary cooking fires scattered across a settlement. They were carefully placed objects inside a funerary landscape shaped by ritual, memory, and the treatment of the dead. The wood had darkened, the stones carried traces of heat, and invisible chemical residues still clung to the ancient surfaces. Researchers collected samples from those residues and examined the molecules that thousands of years had failed to erase completely. The analysis revealed chemical markers consistent with cannabis being heated inside the braziers. This discovery changed the case immediately because the plant was no longer represented by a loose seed inside a general hearth. Cannabis had been placed inside a specific device designed to contain hot stones and produce smoke or vapor. The archaeological context also reduced many alternative explanations that remained possible at the Utah hearth. No evidence suggested that these braziers had simply been used to cook an ordinary meal. Their position among graves connected them to ceremonies performed around death rather than everyday domestic life. The heated stones provided a controlled surface on which plant material could smolder without a large open flame. That method would release aromatic smoke and active compounds while allowing participants to regulate how quickly the plant burned. The evidence therefore moves beyond simple plant use and enters our third category, intentional smoke production. Yet chemistry alone cannot tell us exactly what the people standing nearby did with the smoke. The residues do not preserve a face leaning forward, a chest inhaling, or a hand pulling fabric across an entrance. They cannot reveal whether one ritual specialist participated or an entire group gathered around the brazier. They also cannot tell us how much cannabis was used or what sensations the participants expected. The chemical evidence identifies the plant, while the burial setting suggests that its smoke carried ceremonial importance. Researchers also found indications that some of the cannabis contained higher levels of psychoactive compounds than many wild plants. This may mean the people selected especially potent plants or gathered them from environments where stronger varieties naturally grew. Either possibility suggests knowledge that went beyond accidentally throwing random vegetation onto a fire. Someone had to recognize the plant, preserve that knowledge, and bring it into a highly structured ritual setting. That knowledge may have traveled through families, healers, religious specialists, or mobile communities crossing the mountain routes. The brazier became more than a container because it transformed plant knowledge into a repeatable experience. Heat could be controlled, the same material could be added again, and the resulting smoke could be produced at a chosen moment. This is the first major turning point in our investigation. The wishbone seeds showed that humans used tobacco long ago, but the Jirzankal braziers revealed deliberate technology built around smoke itself. The younger discovery therefore provides stronger behavioral evidence than the much older tobacco seeds. Still, one question remains suspended above the graves. Was the smoke allowed to drift into the open mountain air, or was it trapped close enough for people to breathe intentionally? To answer that, we must examine the space around the brazier and the testimony of an ancient witness. Outside in open air, smoke rises quickly, bends with the wind, and becomes difficult for any group to control. Inside a covered space, the same smoke can remain close to the body for much longer. A roof of hide, felt, or woven material could slow the smoke before it escaped into the night. The brazier would then become the center of a temporary chamber filled with heat, scent, and suspended particles. No narrow pipe would be necessary because every person inside could breathe from the same cloud. This possibility changes how we search for the earliest smoking technology. The first device for inhaling smoke may not have been something a person held in one hand. It may have been an entire enclosed space built around a controlled source of heat. The people at Dzierżonkoł left no surviving tent that could confirm such a reconstruction. Fabric, rope, and wooden supports would rarely survive for thousands of years in recognizable form. The cemetery therefore preserves the smoke-producing equipment, but not the complete environment that once surrounded it. To move beyond that silence, historians turn to a written description from the ancient Greek world. In the 5th century BC, Herodotus recorded a striking custom practiced by people he identified as Scythians. He described them placing hemp seeds onto red-hot stones beneath a small covering. The heated plant produced a dense vapor or smoke that filled the enclosed space around them. According to his account, the participants reacted loudly and appeared overwhelmed by the experience. His description is vivid, but an ancient writer cannot be treated like a modern camera. Herodotus sometimes relied on travelers, interpreters, and stories gathered far from the events he described. He also wrote for Greek readers who often regarded distant cultures as strange, exotic, or difficult to understand. His words may preserve observation, misunderstanding, exaggeration, or several of these elements at once. For centuries, the account remained fascinating but difficult to test against physical evidence. Then discoveries such as the Dzierżonkoł braziers gave archaeologists an independent reason to reconsider the ancient description. The cemetery was not the same place Herodotus visited, and its people cannot automatically be identified with every Scythian group. Yet the combination of cannabis, heated stones, wooden braziers, and ritual context resembles the basic technology he described. Two different forms of evidence had begun pointing toward a similar kind of behavior. The text supplied actions that the artifacts could not preserve. The artifacts supplied physical support that the text could never provide by itself. Together, they make intentional inhalation more plausible than either source would alone. This still does not prove every person at the ceremony deliberately inhaled the smoke. Some may have stood outside, while others may have approached only briefly. The smoke may have served funerary, medicinal, spiritual, social, or several overlapping purposes. We also cannot reconstruct the exact words, beliefs, or sensations experienced inside that ancient space. What we can say is that cannabis was deliberately heated in ritual equipment capable of surrounding people with smoke. This raises the evidence from intentional production to probable inhalation. It also reveals that early smoke use may have been communal before it became an individual habit. The chamber allowed one source of smoke to create a shared experience for everyone gathered nearby. But communal inhalation still differs from the image most people associate with smoking today. For that, we need a smaller device capable of carrying smoke directly from burning material to a single human mouth. A pipe changes the entire structure of smoke use by concentrating heat, plant material, airflow, and inhalation into one portable object. Instead of filling a room, the device directs smoke through a narrow passage toward a single person. The bowl holds the plant close to the heat, while the stem separates the mouth from the burning material. This design gives the user greater control over timing, airflow, and the amount of smoke taken into the body. Yet an object shaped like a pipe does not automatically prove that people used it for smoking. Some hollow objects may have served as whistles, ritual tubes, containers, or tools with purposes no longer understood. Archaeologists therefore examine the object for darkening, heat damage, residue, and wear around the opening. A burned bowl suggests repeated exposure to heat, but it still cannot identify the plant placed inside. That answer may survive as microscopic particles or chemical compounds trapped within cracks in the ancient surface. Researchers can carefully remove samples and search for molecular traces associated with tobacco or other plants. When a specialized pipe contains both burning damage and identifiable plant residue, the behavioral evidence becomes much stronger. The object shows how smoke was produced, while the residue reveals at least part of what created it. Its narrow stem also provides a direct route between the heated material and the user's mouth. This combination brings the investigation closest to what modern viewers would immediately recognize as smoking. Ancient pipes discovered across the Americas reveal that this technology eventually became highly developed and culturally significant. Some were simple tubes, while others were carved from stone or shaped from clay into elaborate forms. Their designs could reflect local materials, artistic traditions, social identities, or ceremonial roles. A pipe might belong to a healer, a ritual specialist, a respected leader, or an ordinary community member. The object alone cannot tell us who used it or how frequently it entered daily life. It also cannot reveal whether the smoke was swallowed deeply, held briefly, or released almost immediately. However, the pipe reduces the uncertainty surrounding one critical action. Smoke was no longer merely present in the environment. It was gathered, directed, and delivered toward a human mouth through a purpose-built channel. This places residue-bearing pipes within the strongest category of our investigation: direct evidence for inhalation technology. But stronger evidence does not always mean older evidence. Many surviving pipes are far younger than the tobacco seeds discovered at the Utah hearth. The oldest clue may therefore tell us when humans used a plant, while a younger tool explains how smoke entered the body. This difference prevents us from choosing one artifact and declaring the case completely solved. The evidence now forms a sequence rather than a single invention: hearth, selected plant, brazier, enclosed chamber, and pipe. Every stage reveals greater control over smoke, but none preserves the first person who decided to inhale it deliberately. The evidence now lies before us, but each discovery answers a different version of the question we began with. The oldest fires prove that ancient humans lived beside smoke, although ordinary exposure cannot be called intentional smoking. The wishbone hearth shows that people interacted with tobacco roughly 12,300 years ago. Those burned seeds establish an ancient relationship between humans and Nicotiana, but they do not reveal exactly how the plant was used. The Jerzankal braziers provide a younger but more informative form of evidence. Cannabis was deliberately heated on stones within equipment placed in a ritual burial setting. This demonstrates intentional smoke production rather than the accidental burning of an unknown plant. The surrounding context and ancient descriptions make deliberate inhalation plausible, although no surviving breath can confirm the final action. Residue-bearing pipes eventually provide the clearest evidence that smoke was directed toward an individual human mouth. These discoveries form several thresholds rather than one simple beginning. The first threshold was exposure, when controlled fire made smoke a constant part of human life. The second was plant knowledge, when people learned that different vegetation produced different smells, sensations, and physical reactions. The third was selection, when a particular plant was gathered and carried to a place where humans could use it. The fourth was intentional smoke production, when heat, stones, braziers, or enclosed spaces were arranged around the chosen material. The fifth was direct inhalation technology, when pipes concentrated smoke and delivered it through a controlled channel. No single threshold can honestly be identified as the moment smoking was invented. The behavior emerged gradually as observation, memory, ritual, and technology accumulated across generations. The oldest surviving tobacco clue therefore gives us one answer. Humans were using tobacco by approximately 12,300 years ago, long before cultivated plantations or written history. The strongest early evidence for deliberate ritual smoke production gives us another answer. By roughly 2,500 years ago, communities in Central Asia were intentionally heating cannabis in specialized equipment. Ancient testimony suggests that some people enclosed themselves with similar smoke or vapor and experienced it as a group. Pipes later make the act more recognizable by showing smoke traveling directly from burning material toward one person. Yet the true first inhalation may have happened thousands of years before any surviving seed, brazier, chamber, or pipe. It may have occurred when someone noticed that one plant's smoke felt different from ordinary wood smoke. That person may have remembered the sensation, selected the plant again, and shared the discovery with others. Nothing from that moment needed to become stone, pottery, or writing. The verdict is therefore precise but incomplete. Intentional smoking is ancient, while its first human breath remains beyond the reach of archaeology. The investigation returns to the ancient hearth, where the burned Nicotiana seeds first appeared beneath layers of desert soil. At the beginning, those tiny seeds seemed capable of answering the entire question on their own. Now we understand that they preserve only one fragment of a much larger human behavior. The seeds reveal that tobacco was present, while the surrounding tools show that people gathered and worked beside the fire. The ash confirms that something burned, but it cannot preserve the purpose behind the flames. The The Jerzonkal braziers bring us closer because they show a chosen plant heated inside specialized ritual equipment. The enclosed spaces described in ancient testimony suggest that people sometimes remained deliberately close to the resulting smoke. The appearance of pipes brings the evidence closer still by creating a direct pathway from burning plants to a human mouth. Each discovery captures one part of the sequence, yet none preserves the thought that began it. Archaeologists cannot recover the instant when someone first noticed that an unfamiliar smoke changed the way the body felt. They cannot hear the warning, instruction, or story that may have been spoken beside the fire afterward. They cannot know whether the first deliberate inhalation was an experiment, a treatment, a ritual, or a simple act of curiosity. That moment may have occurred once and disappeared, leaving no tool designed to survive the passage of time. What survived instead was a trail of increasing control over plants, heat, space, and breath. Smoking did not suddenly appear when someone invented a pipe or planted the first field of tobacco. It emerged gradually as humans learned to recognize certain plants, recreate their effects, and pass that knowledge between generations. The first breath remains lost, but the evidence shows that the search for meaningful smoke reaches deep into humanity's ancient past. And within a few burned seeds, a wooden brazier, and a stained pipe, the vanished outline of that behavior can still be seen.